Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down the big topics. And today, we are diving into one of the all-time classic sports debates. You know the one? Michael Jordan, the undisputed GOAT of his era. But could his game possibly hang in the NBA of today?
So to really answer that, you can't just throw stats at the wall. It's not apples to apples. First, we have to travel back in time and really understand the world he played in. Because honestly, the rules made it a completely different game.
All right, let's set the scene here. The brand of basketball Jordan played was shaped by a rule book that basically encouraged a style of play that was way more physical than anything you see on a court today.
First thing you gotta understand is a little something called the hand check. Imagine this, you're trying to drive past your defender and he can legally just put his hands and his forearm right on you, steering you, slowing you down, messing with your dribble. Getting to the rim wasn't just a move, it was a full-on battle every single time.
And then there was this other huge difference, the illegal defense rule. What this basically meant was that teams had to play man-to-man. You couldn't just have guys packing the paint playing a zone. And for a one-on-one master like Jordan, well, that was a gift. It guaranteed him an island, a clear one-on-one matchup to go to work.
So you put those two things together, and what do you get? You get a game that people said was like trying to play basketball in quicksand. The court was clogged, the action was super physical, and the whole offense was built on these tough, contested shots in the mid-range. A far cry from the wide-open game we see today.
But then, right around the turn of the millennium, the NBA decided things had gotten a little too slow, a little too bogged down. They wanted more points, more excitement, more flow. They decided it was time for a change.
And that led to a whirlwind of rule changes. In just a few years, they flipped the game on its head. First, boom, illegal defense was gone. Zone was now in play. But to keep things balanced, they added the defensive 3-second rule, so big men couldn't just camp under the hoop all day. And then came the big one. In 2004, hand-checking was banned, outlawed.
And the impact? It wasn't gradual, it was immediate, and it was dramatic. Just look at the league's scoring average the very next season. It jumped by almost 4 points a game. That's not a small tweak, that's like a dam breaking. The game was changed overnight.
So let's be clear, this was no accident. The NBA literally paved a superhighway for fast, athletic guards. They essentially re-engineered the entire sport to reward guys who could get to the basket and create off the dribble.
But here's the thing. The new rules just opened the door. It was a whole new philosophy, a new way of thinking that really built the modern game we know today. This was a revolution in the front office, not just on the court.
And that philosophy is often called Moneyball. Basically, people started using data to find the absolute best shots you can take. And the math was simple. A three-pointer is worth 50% more than a two-pointer, and layups are your highest percentage shot. So what about that shot in between, the mid-range jumper? Well, statistically, that became public enemy number one.
And you can really see this new way of thinking visualized here. All of a sudden, teams saw the court as a grid of probabilities. They started hunting for only the most efficient shots, layups and threes. Everything in that middle area became like a no-fly zone.
And the result? Well, that was the three-point revolution. This new focus completely changed the geometry of the game. It forced defenses to spread out across the entire court, which created these huge, wide-open driving lanes we'd never seen before.
Okay, so we've set the stage. We've got a faster game, a more wide-open game, a game obsessed with analytics. So the million-dollar question, how would Michael Jordan, the legend himself, actually do in this new world?
Well, the general feeling is that these new rules wouldn't have slowed him down, they would have set him free. I mean, just imagine that explosive first step with no one allowed to put a hand on him. Imagine those wide open lanes with no center just parked underneath the rim. And his greatest weapon, that killer mid-range game, it's the perfect counterpunch to modern defenses that are designed to give up that exact shot. And don't even get me started on his defense. He'd be the perfect modern wing who could switch onto anybody.
And you know what's crazy? We actually got a little sneak peek of this. There was this Point Jordan experiment back in 1989 where they just gave him the ball and ran the whole offense through him. For 24 games, he averaged almost 11 assists. He was putting up numbers that look like they're straight out of today's playbook. And yeah, a lot of the guys who actually played back in that physical era, they think his scoring would have been just unbelievable today. They talk about the freedom players have now compared to the trench warfare they went through. It's a difference they can feel in their bones.
But all right, let's be real.
there's always one big but that comes up in this conversation. The one major knock against him, his career three-point percentage.
And yeah, on the surface, that number looks pretty bad, right? Just under 29% from deep. In a league that lives and dies by the three, that seems like a massive hole in his game.
But just like with the rule changes, context is everything. Because when you actually start to dig into the data, a very, very different story about Jordan the shooter starts to emerge.
Okay, this right here is the key piece of evidence. For 3 seasons in the 90s, the NBA actually shortened the three-point line. And look what happened to Jordan's numbers. His percentage shot up to over 40%, and he took a lot more of them. This proves that when the shot was at a comfortable, modern distance for him, he wasn't just capable, he was an elite shooter.
And this stat really tells the true story. The numbers show that even from the original, longer line, whenever he actually made a point to shoot a couple of threes a game, he was a more than capable shooter. See, his low career percentage wasn't about a lack of skill. It was about a lack of priority in an era that just didn't care about that shot.
So when you put all of this together, it leads to a pretty powerful conclusion that kind of reframes this entire debate we've been having for years.
Let's just wrap this up with the numbers. Look at his efficiency. He was a massive statistical outlier in what was probably the toughest, most inefficient scoring era in modern history. Now take that player and drop him into today's wide-open, high-efficiency game. It's not a stretch to say his numbers would absolutely explode.
And that's really the heart of it. Maybe we've been looking at this all wrong. The physicality and the rules of the 90s, they weren't tools that helped him. They were shackles that held him back. The modern game wouldn't be an obstacle for him to overcome. It would have been the key to unlocking an even higher level of greatness.
So in the end, the question changes. It's not if Jordan would adapt and still dominate today. The real question, the one that's kind of fun and scary to think about, is just how much higher could his ceiling have been if he had been totally and completely unleashed in this era?